Hello, my name is Zachary Graves, and today I'm going to be talking about control theory. Now, control theory to me is very interesting because it differs from other positivist theories in two very important ways. Firstly, rather than asking what causes deviance, it asks what causes conformity, and then assumes that a lack of those things is what's causing deviance. Secondly, it accepts the Freudian idea of natural deviance, meaning that people will naturally gravitate towards deviant acts. That was the basis for Travis Hershey when he conceived the theory in 1969. He believed that we did innately tend to go towards deviant acts, but that tendency is suppressed by social bonds. Hershey understood social bonds as coming in four different forms. Firstly, you have an attachment to conventional people and institutions, your family, your friends, church, stuff like that. Secondly, you have a commitment to conventional actions like education and stable employment. Third, an involvement in conventional activities, which in and of itself takes away your time from being able to participate in and even think about deviant acts. Fourth, there's a belief in the moral fortitude of conventional rules of society. And if all of these four things are strong, you're going to be more conforming, whereas if they're weak, you'll be more deviant. Later in the 20th century, Michael Gottfredson suggested the concept of self-control as being the cause of deviance, and asserted that it was even more useful in explaining deviance than the previous aspects of control theory. What he meant was that if you have an individual who is socialized inadequately, they're going to become, reckless, impulsive, and have really bad self-control, and that's what's going to cause them to be deviant. Even later on, Charles Tittle theorized that an imbalance of control is the cause of deviance, meaning that you have these two situations, one of which is control surplus, meaning that one person has way too much power over other people, and it causes that individual to be deviant. Whereas you have the opposite, control deficit, where a lot of other people have too much power over one individual, and that causes that individual to be a deviant. And this only covers a small part of control theory. There's also the idea of shaming. John Braithwaite brought this to light. He first pointed out that there are two different types of shaming. There's disintegrative and reintegrative. Under disintegrative shaming, the person is punished, and that punishment entails them being cut off from society. Whereas in integrative shaming, the person still feels guilty, but rather than being cut out of society, they're shown acceptance. And Braithwaite argued that there's a lot of disintegrative shaming in individualistic cultures like in the West, in the United States specifically, and he thought that if we could use reintegrative shaming, which is more popular in collectivistic cultures like China and Japan, we would be able to reduce crime. And all of this is related to the idea of deterrence. Now, under deterrence doctrine, people are assumed to be rational beings. We have this cost-benefit relationship to all of our actions where we weigh the cost versus the benefits and decide whether the action is worth committing. Now, under that, if a crime is met with a punishment, then in theory the crime should decrease. But in order for it to do that, the punishment must be severe enough to deter the crime, certain enough to occur, and swiftly carried out after the crime. In doing so, there are two different types of deterrence. There's general deterrence, where you've punished one individual, and because of that individual being punished, it sets an example for the rest of society, and so they do not commit the crime. Whereas you have specific deterrence, where you're punishing that individual, and that one individual is the one who is going to be deterred from committing the crime anymore. And all of this makes control theory seem really, really attractive, but there are some major critiques that seriously poke some holes in it. First of all, the studies that have been done on it have no control group for the reciprocal effect, meaning that they all associate weak social bonds with deviance and blame those social bonds for causing the deviance, but completely ignore the idea that the deviance might actually be causing the weak social bonds. Secondly, the strong social bonds of collectivist societies itself might be what leads to less crime and not so much the reintegrative shaming. And even if it did work to decrease crime, it might only work for first-time offenders, whereas hardened criminals who don't really care what other people think are not going to be affected by it. Third, the severity of punishment actually tends to lead to repeat offending rather than deterring the crime, so the severity might not actually affect crime in the way that people think. Fourth, the control theory sees control as being a preventer of deviance, but completely ignores the possibility that it is a potential cause of deviance. And all of this seems to stem from one thing, the cause-correlation dichotomy, which is used a lot in psychology, and it means that just because two things correlate does not necessarily mean that they're causing each other.